The music didn't come from the studio. It came from the room, and we demolished the room. Every song you love from this era, the Chess record sessions, the Fillmore West, the Savoy Ballroom, CBGBs, those recordings exist because of the specific physics of a specific space on a specific night, the ceiling height, the floor, the distance between the musician and the back wall. You can hear it in the recordings if you know what you're listening for. The room is in the music. The room is also gone. Not archived, not preserved, gone, demolished, gutted, or converted into a clothing store selling leather jackets at prices nobody who played there could have afforded. We saved the recordings and demolished the rooms that made them, and nobody at the time thought that was worth arguing about. Here's what was lost. The Savoy Ballroom, Lenox Avenue, Harlem, 1926 to 1958. The Savoy Ballroom opened on March 12, 1926. The founders were Mo Gale, a white promoter, and Charles Buchanan, his black business partner. And from the first night, the room operated on a principle that was radical for New York in 1926 and remained radical for most of the 32 years it stayed open. Anyone could come in. Any race, any neighborhood, any combination of people who wanted to be in the same room listening to the same band. The admission price on a weeknight was 30 cents, on weekends 85 cents. The music was continuous. 2 bandstands positioned at opposite ends of the floor, one playing while the other rested. No gap, no silence, the night uninterrupted from opening until closing. The floor was 250 feet long. When it was full, which it frequently was, 4,000 people were dancing in the same room. What that room produced is not a short list. The Lindy Hop, the foundational American partner dance, the one that would eventually travel to Europe and influence every social dance form that followed it, was born on that floor and developed there over years by dancers who came back night after night and pushed it further. Chick Webb held a residency at the Savoy through the 1930s, and it was at the Savoy in 1934 that a 16-year-old girl named Ella Fitzgerald entered an amateur contest and sang with his band. Webb hired her on the spot. She would record with him for the rest of his life. In 1937, Benny Goodman brought his band to the Savoy for what was billed as a battle of the bands against Webb. Goodman had just come off the Carnegie Hall concert that would define his legacy. He arrived at the Savoy that night as the king of swing. By most accounts from people who were there, Chick Webb dismantled him. The crowd, which knew Webb, knew the room, had been there for years, made their judgment audible. Goodman was gracious about it afterward. He said Webb won. Malcolm X wrote about the Savoy in his autobiography. He described dancing there as a young man, and the passage has a quality his writing rarely has: unguarded, uncomplicatedly happy. For a man whose memoir is largely an account of systems designed to degrade and diminish, the Savoy appears as a place where that pressure briefly lifted. In 1943, the city of New York temporarily closed the Savoy Ballroom. The stated reason was public health concerns. The actual reason, understood at the time and documented since, was that white and black New Yorkers were dancing together in large numbers, and certain city officials found this intolerable. The closure lasted several months. The Savoy reopened. It closed permanently in 1958. The demolition was not contested in any documented record. No preservation application was filed. No public campaign was organized. The concept of protecting a music venue as a cultural site, the legal frameworks, the civic vocabulary for arguing that a room where art was made is worth keeping, largely didn't exist yet. The Savoy came down and Savoy Park went up, and the name survived the way names do, attached to something that has no memory of what it's named for. The recordings made at the Savoy and by the musicians who defined it are in libraries and archives and streaming services. Ella Fitzgerald's voice is perfectly preserved. The floor she first sang on is not.
Chess Records, 2120 South Michigan Avenue, Chicago, 1957, present. In June of 1964, Keith Richards and Brian Jones arrived at 2120 South Michigan Avenue before the building opened. They sat on the front steps and waited. They had flown from England for this, not for a show, not for a tour date, but for this specific address, this specific room. When the door opened, they went inside and recorded. The Rolling Stones were not yet famous in America. They were 20 years old, most of them, and they had learned everything they thought they knew about music from records made in this building. Muddy Waters, Howlin Wolf, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Etta James, Little Walter, Sonny Boy Williamson. The recordings that came out of 2120 South Michigan Avenue in the late 1950s and early 1960s did not just influence what became rock and roll, they were its skeleton. Richards understood this. Sitting on those steps, waiting, was not a casual gesture. It was a pilgrimage, and he knew it. What Chess Records did to the artists who made those recordings is a different story, and it has been told in courtrooms as much as in music journalism. The publishing arrangements at Chess and at most independent labels of the era were structured to move rights away from artists and toward the label as quickly and completely as possible. Songs were signed over for flat fees. Royalty statements did not always reflect reality. Willie Dixon, who wrote or co-wrote an extraordinary number of the records that defined the Chess catalog, Hoochie Coochie Man, Little Red Rooster, I Just Want to Make Love to You, spent years in litigation trying to recover what he was owed. Some cases settled. The compositions that Dixon wrote in that building, in some cases literally sitting in the studio, generated enormous sums for decades. Dixon saw a fraction of it. Muddy Waters drove a Cadillac. He also, for significant portions of his career, worked as a janitor to cover his expenses between tours, because the royalties from records that were defining American popular music did not pay his rent. This is confirmed. This is not a rumor or a contested account. The economics of Chess Records, like the economics of most independent labels of the period, were designed to concentrate earnings at the top. The artists at the bottom of that structure made the music and were paid accordingly. The building at 2120 South Michigan Avenue still stands. It has a Chicago landmark designation. It is operated by Willie Dixon's estate as the Blues Heaven Foundation, and the historical marker outside identifies it correctly as one of the most significant addresses in American music history. People come from around the world to stand in front of it and take photographs. The equipment is gone. The acoustic environment, the specific dimensions of the room, the placement of the control booth, the ceiling height, the floor, has been altered through decades of renovation and repurposing. What you are visiting at 2120 South Michigan Avenue is a building that once contained something. The landmark status preserved the shell. The interior that produced those recordings, the specific physical space where Muddy Waters stood in front of a microphone and made something that would travel to England and teach a generation of musicians what the blues actually felt like, that room no longer exists. The records are in the Library of Congress. The National Recording Registry added several Chess recordings to its catalog of works deemed culturally significant and worthy of preservation. The process for designating a recording as historically significant is well established. The process for designating the room where it was recorded, the acoustics, the dimensions, the physical fact of it, is not. We built one and not the other. The results are what you'd expect.
The Fillmore West, Market Street at Van Ness, San Francisco, 1968-1971. On July 4, 1971, Bill Graham stood in front of an audience at the Fillmore West and told them the show they were watching was the last one. The room was not failing. The crowds were not gone. The lease was not up. Graham had made a decision, and the decision was this. The thing that made the Fillmore West worth running was already ending, and he would rather close it himself than watch it become something else. That kind of clarity, the ability to name the moment a thing is over and stop there, is rarer than it sounds. Graham had started promoting concerts at the original Fillmore Auditorium on Fillmore Street in 1965, initially for the San Francisco Mime Troupe, and then, rapidly, for anyone who would fill the room. The Fillmore West opened in 1968 at the former Carousel Ballroom, a space the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane had tried to run as a musician-owned collective and found they could not sustain. Graham took it over and ran it the way he ran everything, with absolute control over the details and an instinct for programming that did not respect genre lines. The list of acts who played the Fillmore West between 1968 and 1971 is not a list organized by category. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Who, Jefferson Airplane, Creedence Clearwater Revival, The Grateful Dead, Miles Davis, B.B. King, Santana. The room did not care what kind of music you played. It cared whether you could fill it and whether Graham wanted to book you. And those two things were not always the same. The posters were part of it. Graham commissioned psychedelic concert posters from artists including Wes Wilson and Victor Moscoso, weekly announcements for upcoming shows printed in limited runs and distributed around the city. They were not intended as art objects. They became art objects. They're in museum collections now, which is a form of preservation, though not the one anyone planned. What Graham said in interviews from the period about why he was closing the room was specific. The music industry was moving toward arenas. The economics that made the Fillmore possible, general admission, a few hundred people close to the stage, a ticket price that a young person could manage, were being replaced by a larger and more efficient model. Graham did not think the larger model was the same thing. He thought it was a different thing that happened to involve the same musicians. He didn't want to run the different thing. He closed the Fillmore West and opened larger venues because that was where the industry was going, but he named the moment the original idea ended. The building on Market Street still stands. It has operated as a music venue intermittently in the decades since 1971. You can see a show there. The room is intact in the architectural sense, the walls, the floor, the stage. What Graham was running in that room from 1968 to 1971, the specific convergence of booking philosophy, economic structure, cultural moment, and audience expectation, ended on the night he said it ended. He understood this. The building survived. The thing that made it matter, Graham closed himself because he understood it well enough to know it was already over. There is something to sit with in that. Not every loss is imposed from outside. Some things are ended by the people who knew them best because the alternative was watching them degrade into a version of themselves that would have been worse than the ending. Graham chose the ending. Not everyone got that choice.
CBGB, 315 Bowery, Manhattan, 1973 to 2006. The name was an acronym: Country, Bluegrass, Blues, and Other Music for Uplifting Gormandizers. Hilly Crystal meant it. He intended to book country music, bluegrass, blues, the forms he loved, the forms he thought deserved a room on the Bowery. The first bands that came to him were Television, Patti Smith, the Ramones, Talking Heads, Blondie, Richard Hell, and the Voidoids. None of them played country music. Crystal let them play anyway,
And what followed from that decision is one of the better documented creative explosions in American music history. The room itself, by every first-hand account, was not comfortable. The ceiling was low, the sight lines were poor depending on where you stood, the sound system was inconsistent, the bathroom, which would eventually become one of the most written about bathrooms in rock history, was by all accounts, and by design or neglect, genuinely squalid. The stage was small, the capacity was small. The distance between the audience and whoever was performing was never more than 30 feet, regardless of where you stood, and that proximity, that specific physical fact about the dimensions of the room, was not incidental to what happened there. The music that came out of CBGBs was not made for arenas. It was made for a room where you could see the sweat and hear the mistakes and feel the thing happening in real time, close enough to touch. The closure came in October 2006, the result of a rent dispute with the Bowery Residents Committee, the nonprofit that owned the building. The final show was on October 15th. Patti Smith played it, the same artist who had been among the first, who had helped build the room's identity from the beginning, who came back at the end to close it. Hilly Crystal died the following August. He was 75. What replaced CBGB's was a John Varvatos boutique, high-end men's fashion, leather jackets at prices that would have been unimaginable to anyone who paid the $3 cover in 1977. The irony was noted everywhere it could be noted, in the music press, in the general press, in the accumulated commentary of everyone who had ever cared about the room. Punk's home became a luxury retail space. The observation made itself. Varvatos kept the bathroom. This is documented. In the early years of the boutique's operation, the original CBGB's bathroom, intact, unrenovated, carrying 30 years of accumulated grime and graffiti and the general evidence of its history, was preserved within the store as a deliberate gesture toward what the space used to be. Customers shopping for clothing could look at it. At some point, the bathroom was removed. The gesture ended. The space was refreshed. That arc, from room to boutique to preserved bathroom to removed bathroom, is a compressed version of how cultural memory actually works, and it is not a flattering version. We acknowledge what we lost, we preserve a piece of it as a symbol. Eventually, the symbol becomes inconvenient or expensive or just aesthetically inconsistent with what we're trying to do now, and we remove it. What's left is the address.
The recordings are safe. That is worth saying plainly because it's true and it matters. You can stream Ella Fitzgerald singing at the Savoy. You can hear Muddy Waters at 2120 South Michigan, the room present in the sound even if the room is gone. The specific reverb, the ceiling height, the particular way that space handled a harmonica or an electric guitar at full volume. You can hear the Fillmore West in the live recordings from those 3 years, the audience noise, the room sound that no studio could replicate. You can hear the Ramones at CBGB's, the tightness of the space audible in the mix, the way the music sounds like it was made 6 inches from your face, because it was. The technology of preservation worked. What it preserved was the audio. What it didn't preserve was the physics, the weight of 4,000 people dancing on a single floor, the temperature at 2120 South Michigan in July with no air conditioning, and the tape rolling, because tape was expensive and every take had to matter, the specific smell of the Fillmore, sweat and fog machine and whatever they were burning in the parking lot, the floor at CBGB's, which absorbed 30 years of spilled beer and was probably structurally compromised by the end and didn't care. These things shaped the music, not metaphorically, physically. The room told the musicians what was possible. The audience told the musicians what was working. The specific conditions of a specific night in a specific building produced sounds that would not have been produced anywhere else, under any other circumstances. We know this because we can hear it. We can hear the room in the recording. We can hear what it was. We just can't go back to it. That isn't a tragedy exactly. Cities change. Buildings are repurposed. The economics of maintaining a room are not suspended because something important happened there once. The Savoy was demolished because someone needed to build housing, and people need housing. CBGBs closed because the rent went up, and rents go up. These are not villainous acts. They are the ordinary operations of cities that are not organized around the preservation of the rooms where culture happened to occur. The question is not whether we should have saved all of it. We couldn't have. The question is whether we understood what we were losing in the moment we were losing it, whether the decision to demolish or convert or let the lease expire was made with any real accounting of what the room had been. In most of these cases, the honest answer is that the accounting came later, after the floor was gone, after the equipment was hauled out, after the boutique opened and someone wrote the piece noting the irony. We understood what we had lost once it was gone, which is the most human possible relationship to loss, and also the least useful one. The records remain. The rooms are addresses now, or parking structures, or apartment buildings, with names that gesture at what stood there before. You can stand on the block where the Savoy Ballroom was, and know, if you've done the reading, that Ella Fitzgerald first sang in public somewhere very close to where you're standing. You can stand outside 2120 South Michigan and read the marker. You can stand on the Bowery and look at the building and know. Knowing is not nothing. It is also not the same as the room.